How's it going, brother?
Just trying to set up. I realize I've got a new phone and I don't have any headphones for it. So I was like, right,
Mate,
better go somewhere a bit quiet. Can
that
you hear me?
top, yes, I can. That top is legendary. That is ace.
Oh, this was a novice comp uh maybe 2 years ago, I
Right.
think. So it's our long line of novice comps where we run nerd themes or whatever. So this was literally just this is like from the book.
Yeah.
And then I got somebody from Fiverr to actually change Lord of the Rings to Lord of the Bar. And oh wait, you see the back?
Yes. Is that Modo?
Yeah, so it's like Sauron is standing over a whole bunch of dead bodies with a barbell in his hand.
Mate, I love that when you do these competitions, right, and you do the prizes and the themes, that's
Yeah.
gold. That's actually gold. Who came up with that idea?
We usually just, it's either me or whoever comes up with a good idea.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I've been waiting to use this one for a while. The next one's going to be Pokemon themed because he's gone down a like Pokemon hole now. He collects them and like an investment thing. So he's got
Oh,
tens of
really? So
thousands of
he's
Pokemon
in.
dollars of Pokemon cards. But yeah, so our next
Right.
one is called Pokebar. Lift them all.
Pokeball. Right, I see. I see. I keep up to date, mate, all the time with what you guys are doing with the different competitions and stuff like that. I miss it, mate. I miss it. Like coming, like when we were over, because we literally lived for that time right round the corner from the gym, and
Yeah, yeah,
I miss the days I could literally just walk. It was a 2 minute walk, come around the corner, go straight into the gym. And more like to this state, like that gym you guys have. That's my idea of a gym, it's just like just
yeah,
barbells, like plates, racks, there's like three machines in there, There's not
yeah.
like
I don't think there's much more now. I can't remember. We might have got some cable stuff crossover and a lat pull down from
yeah.
China.
Yeah.
A bit more recently since then, but yeah, nothing's really changed. It's probably more dust,
Yeah,
but,
yeah, more test. I one of
but
these days, mate, if I ever come back over, that's one of gonna be my first visits to you guys coming into that
good,
gym.
good.
Yeah, for sure. But mate, what's been going on? It's been probably about a year, is it, since we you
I
last came
don't
on?
know because time just flows into this endless swirling nothingness. I have no idea when things happened or how long ago things were. It's once you have kids,
For
it's
sure.
it's it's all gone. There's your sleep is random, it's chaotic. Your perception of time just disappears. It's like, oh, how old is my child? That determines the rate of aging of the universe at that point. So,
So
yeah, it was, it
have
was,
you
it
just
was
got the one Rowan still? Have you got another one now, or is it
yeah,
just
no, we've got
still?
two.
Yeah,
Dax is
two.
Dax is a bit over two now.
Oh man,
So
damn.
yeah, I
Yeah,
haven't I haven't been into the gym earlier than maybe 8 a.m. in probably a couple of years now.
really. Right. Yeah,
So
yeah. I can imagine.
whatever happens in this gym in the morning, I have no idea because it's about getting ready for school. You're still getting up at the same time because that's when kids get up, somewhere between 4:30 and 6,
Mm,
depending on
mm.
whether they've already woken up once, twice, zero times in the night crying for whatever reason. So you just you just by the time you hit morning, you're like, well, that was an adventure, and then you start the day, and then there's more adventures, and you pick them up from daycare, and it's like, what are we crying about now, or are we happy, or so
How do you
my
balance it, mate? Like how? Because like obviously I'm not a dad yet, or like I would like to have kids one day, but how?
mm,
I
you have a very capable partner,
Yes, yeah.
so and it
So that's how you. So how did you navigate it? That is it. Is it that you've got
yeah,
an
well,
understanding
my
partner?
Ness is a nurse, and it's just like timetables work out. So she starts work at 8, finishes at 4, so that just determines my schedule. It works out here because I can leave here at 4 for pickup and get them in the shower, and then I disappear and come back whenever I finish here at 6:37 or whatever.
Yeah,
And she's fed them. They've been showered. they've played or watched TV or whatever they do, and then it's basically when I get home, it's time for bed. So we hang around for a bit, play a bit, read books, do the sleep routine, and then whatever. So
Yeah,
she
I can
just she
imagine.
just she just gets the job done. So it's and
I
it's
can
like she's
imagine
super
that.
regimented in general, and
Yeah,
that's the
well,
only way.
that
You've got to be
helps.
prepared to. That's what you do once you've got kids. Like everything else, you get to go out sometimes. Great, you look forward to it, and then you regret it because you drank or you stayed up past like 10 o'clock, and that screws you for days because
Yeah, yeah.
there's no mercy. You know,
No,
kids
no.
kids don't go, oh, daddy's not feeling well. It's so yeah. It has to be pretty much absolutely paramount. And I'm just really lucky that she lets me still, because I've got a competition schedule. You've got a dozen people who are lining up for competitions coming up, and you've got to make sure that the communication is there. The actual training is there, all that sort of stuff. So, and then comp weekends. We've got states coming up in 2 weeks. The weekend after that, we're rolling straight into our novice comp. So it's
Right,
just like
right.
that's 2 weekends gone. She works weekends. It's every second weekend as well. So you know, it's it, just flexibility and understanding is huge.
Well, it's the understanding part, isn't it? Because not everybody has that. I can, having a partner that guess this is your thing, this is a part of your identity, this is your passion, and finding the right person that supports that, I can imagine is like key. It's massive. Because if you haven't got that, then that's where the conversations go of, oh, why are you doing this and stuff like that, Because
Exactly.
and that's tricky because we I don't know, it's like baked into us at this point. Like I said to Lainey, I'm doing this till the day I drop dead,
Yeah.
like it's just a part of who I am, until I take my last breath. If I'm in a wheelchair, I'm gonna find a way to get a barbell over my head or something like that. Like
Yeah. Strengthen up your
but
neck.
yeah. Just like doing all sorts of weird stuff. But so anything else gone on, mate, since we last caught up?
God knows what. Um, I don't know. Probably gotten hairier as I as
Yeah.
I as I rapidly age. Like I'm I'm closer to I'm that close to 50 now, and it's like I'm always about 23, 24 years old in my head.
Right.
And then you're like, nope, your body's nearly 50, buddy. You know what?
Mate,
You're
those
on the
weights are
way out.
still
So
going up though. Those because I saw when did
yeah.
you last compete? You hit a record recently, didn't you, in deadlift or something
Oh,
like
like two
that?
weekends ago, I did
Yeah.
just a push pull. So I haven't squatted since nationals last year in August. Is it August? Yeah, about August. Um, so no squats of note, but yeah, I get a little bit of leeway there for qualifying for nationals for the capo, the federation we're in, so I can kind of do a push pull.
Yeah.
Um,
Do you still
because
hold
I'm
the
a master.
record as well? Do you still hold the record at
Uh,
Masters?
I got a few, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I have no idea how many. Um, I think I got one world record a while back, which from like, I don't know, 2 years ago. That might have been a deadlift or something, but yeah, it's like everybody compares in your federation with national records, but everybody's looking at open powerlifting. Like where you sit on that, obviously,
Yeah.
is what matters. So currently, I'm number two for my age group, and I'm hoping nationals this year that I can take that back, and that the other guy who's in number two is Damon McDonald. Uh, I hope he does really well, but just slightly less well.
Well, mate, I wanted to do with you today, like, because I'm thinking you're like a returning guest. This is the third time now I think you've
Yeah,
been on, and I want to do like an annual podcast with you every year. I want like a powerlifting
to watch
catch up. That's it.
the decline.
I want a yearly review in powerlifting with Beau. I thought that
Mm.
would be a good idea. So today I wanted to talk about like. Every year we could talk about, I don't know, things that, powerlifting trends, things that have
That's
shifted.
right.
Powerlifting trends, things that have shifted over the past year, maybe new
Mm.
pet peeves, things that you've noticed over the year. But when it comes to pet peeves, I mean, there's things that I could talk about for days with
Where do you
lifting.
stop?
Or,
Yeah.
yeah, where do you start? So, like, what one thing I'm curious about is, so I think it's last time was maybe a year, 2 years ago, something like that. You were
Mm.
on. Has your perspective evolved at all in terms of like how you program for yourself or how you program for other people? Yeah, I
Mm.
was curious about that, catching up with you around that, because mine certainly has.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Um, I think a really kind of like I feel like the last maybe year or so. So we had last year's nationals, maybe even last 6 months. Um, put things in place, and then a lot of it, some of it just didn't pan out at all, and it was quite, I guess, a good learning experience. Like it's not a great learning experience to not get what you set out to achieve for you, particularly for your clients.
Mm,
Um, but it was a good learning experience in that I figured out a lot of technical strategies. I think in the
mm,
last 6 months, I just sat down and thought about some of the things that didn't really gel for me and why that would be, and then started putting corrections in place. And all of them have paid off really well. Um, and yeah, programming for people as well. Like there's that thing that you sell individualized programming as a thing that is important when deep inside you know that individualized programming is probably one of the most overrated selling points. Like
right.
almost everybody can achieve almost exactly the same thing with almost exactly the same programming. But then you find individuals who throw that completely out, and that really, really do need. You got someone who trains and competes at a high level who's training 3 or 4 times a week, and then you've got like Agata Sitko who's decided she's going to do 7 days of SBD, and you're like, there is no way that that could work for 99.9% of people, but she can make it work because her tolerance, genetics, tissues, whatever, can handle having like a cyclical kind of intensity so that her doing stuff at RP 6 or 7 might be like literally rest.
Yes, yeah,
That's
yeah.
recovery. She can recover from that while still training, whereas most people you actually need to legitimately recover and have a non-training day or whatever. So and other people just really handle work,
Mm,
really thrive on it, and some people don't. Yeah, I think some of the technical stuff I've in terms of like particularly bench technique, using using bench accessories like the Buffalo bar and stuff, that have really made quite a bit of difference to people's like available, pushing the numbers up.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, as deadlift as well, I really sat down because we had a few issues with deadlifts for some people, um, and I just like stripped back everything and just thought about what made sense as to why a deadlift would work. And it turned out it was pretty much exactly right. And it's also super simple. It's
Yeah.
that meme curve of like the guy with his brains dribbling out at the bottom, and then the screaming, crying guy at the top, and then the kind of Jedi Master at the end. And they're saying the same thing, that one. And it is like once you get to that point where you legitimately it clicks, you're like, oh god, it was that easy the whole time.
Yes.
There's no more to it. For deadlifts, like it's getting your center of mass right and getting your brace right, and that's it. Any
Yes,
more than
yeah.
that. There's lots of things, adding constraints, things under your toes, da da da. Like it's pretty much all just bullshit.
Mm,
It's, adding in stuff because you don't really understand why this person's not capable of doing it. Every now and
mm,
then somebody will come out of the work where it's like, that doesn't work for me at all. And that's usually it's like, it's just you're not strong enough or you're not capable enough yet. And you
mm,
just need more training time and proprioception and body awareness that you don't have because you've never done sports activities.
mm.
So powerlifting,
It,
I think
it,
it, right?
it's an interesting one that because I think that as coaches generally, and I'm certainly a bit neurotic with my OCD and stuff like that, and I think that um, this attracts that personality type, those coaches, right? Not all of them, of course, but
Yeah.
um, I think coaches generally have really good intentions and we want to do the best for ourselves and for our clients. But that leads to us massively overthinking it all,
Mhm.
and that was me. I spent years and years and years, mate, wondering, trying to find like the best system or whether that be technique or for periodization or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And I look back and I had this like epiphany moment because a lot of the stuff I was trying for years and years just wasn't working, and I had to be
Mm.
objective about it. I was looking at my numbers and I realized, you know what, all this complex stuff, it's not actually working. Like the weight releases I'm using on the bar or wherever I was using at the time,
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
like none of it's actually having an impact or a carryover.
Just tricks.
It's just
It's
tricks.
almost all just it's variation.
It's
It's
very
doing the same thing in
exactly.
a different way. There's no benefit to it. It's just purely just different.
Yeah,
So you got to find the things that actually drive improvement, not just variation.
that's it. And mate, I had a massive shift in perspective where I went back to basics. So I started off like, let's say, I was doing 5-3-1, right? I think everybody gets introduced to 5-3-1 at some point if you're a
Yeah.
powerlifter, and that's usually the starting point for everybody, right? And then I went away, I learned all the complex stuff. And then I've kind of come back to a very simple approach, and then looking at, okay, 3 sets of 5. Why does that actually work for a novice?
Mm.
Like, why does that work for a beginner? Because it works for everybody that I've tried it with. But now I'm looking at the simple approach, but now I understand why that simple approach works, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Why does a 5x5 work for someone who's like a novice or wherever it might be? And like you
Yeah.
were saying with a technique, it's all about principles, isn't it? At the end of the day, and
It's
that's
just physics.
something. It's just physics,
Yeah.
absolutely. So like, what was I mean, you mentioned the bench press and some tweaks there, because I remember you were
Mm.
into like the Japanese almost style execution of the bench press, and I thought that was really interesting. As your perspective shifted a little bit on there at all, then, or are you still using that setup?
It's probably reinforced even more so down
Right,
that
right.
pathway. Like I do see a lot of people still, heels up benching, old school, kind of big muscle bench presses. And yes, I can see like I think Stu Locke over at Kodiak Barbell said he put up a thing ages ago saying, if you're under a certain body weight, then the Japanese style, the wide grip is quite good. If you're over it, it's very difficult. Um, I don't personally agree with that. I think it's wrong.
Yeah.
I think you can still have a giant, big, muscular, juicy guys still doing quite technical bench presses with flat feet, getting a lot of leg drive, and doing better. Um, like you know, someone maybe like Julius Maddox, who
Mhm.
weighs 200 kilos or whatever and is huge. Maybe, maybe not. But I think there's this weird sort of split between, the kind of like powerlifting where people are using PEDs or in that kind of those federations versus the sort of IPFE type people. And these guys are really focusing because they're really it's really hard to drive muscle growth, obviously being natty for most people.
Yeah.
They work on getting really, really good at it. And these guys are like, well, I'm getting good numbers without being overly fastidious about my bench technique because I'm big, I'm
Mm.
strong. Um, and I was like, well, you can just do both. Like, if you guys
Yeah.
want to do that, you can, but why don't you do that and do really good bench press technique at the same time? But like, I think I put up a little reel the other day. Powerlifting is literally just efficiency. You've got force production. Force production is a limited thing. Like, you can keep doing stuff that gets you stronger, bigger, more muscular, whatever. But you've got a finite amount of force production. Everything we do as coaches is, from a technique perspective, is trying to find a way to turn that force production into movement or trying to stop the movement, the force leaking out somewhere. So if you've got a flat foot bencher versus a heels up bencher, you've got a real perception of tension coming out of your legs. But if you watch really big benchers who tuck their feet, they don't actually have any leg drive. They've just got tight legs. They're holding a stiff structure, but they're not pushing that stiffness where it needs to be. It's just kind of a
Mm.
generalized arch. If you look at the IPF world where there's, 70 and 80 kilo dudes benching over 200 without drugs, they're utilizing every single aspect of the body's available mechanics to make sure that that bar goes down and up
Mm.
without having to produce more force because they just don't have more force. So you look at it like Daikikadama's bench. I don't even understand what's going on there. It's a two-stage bench. He brings it out, he lowers it, he pauses, then he touches the chest and presses it out. And this is an 83 benching 231. So
Mm.
whatever he's doing is working. And it was like, if I could figure out that, then that'd be great. But in the absence of knowing, the magical Japanese secrets, why he's pausing on the way down, um, focusing on things. This is like heaps of coaches, most in that sphere. It's the same things. Where the bar's sitting on your palm, um, how that relates to you're not losing energy through the flexion of the wrist because you're loading up the ulna there. You're utilizing the pec as the main driver rather than the pec, shoulders, and triceps in equal load. You're stretching the
Yes.
sternum open to access really long muscle ranges over the pec. You're minimizing range as much as possible. You're maximizing leg drive. You're learning how to flex your upper spine. All these things that are going to get you doing a really, really efficient bench press. And then if you want to like smash gear and get massive and then do that as well, obviously you're going to be even better, depending on your federation. Then it was like, then the IPF rule came in with everyone sinking because, suddenly they're not allowed to use these really low range of movement benches. And then that was a whole other game. And I was like, well, we've got a couple of guys here who utilize a sink bench really effectively. Um, and it's a whole new art form.
Yeah,
It's like
it is.
it's fascinating watching
It's almost like
little
the difference
Eddie.
between a conventional and a sumo, just
It is, yeah. It's
in
like
bench
Eddie
terms.
Berglund benching 217 or something and like sinking it to his spine and then popping it out. And you're like, holy shit, he was doing like range of motion of this last week. Now he's up here and it's, he still hit a world record. Um, so yeah, I started using it myself a little bit. I'm not super good at it. Um, but you don't need that much because all it is if I don't have, you know, bench depth rules for my bench press, but getting something where you can absorb some of that force and then use the whole body to drive it off was a bit of a game changer. Took a
Right.
while to learn it, and like I said, I'm still not that good at it, but it still allowed me to PR my bench.
Yeah.
It's the first time I've ever used it in competition the other week, and it was
It
great.
went up. So when
Yeah.
it comes to your setup then for your bench technique,
Mm.
would you mind taking us through that? Like, what does that look like from because you mentioned obviously with the wrists, making sure that the bar's stacked over the wrists. Obviously, that's a big point there. But what's it
Yeah.
look like through, say, stage one through to like the last stage?
Well, basically the setup. So if you treat bench press setup as a really systematic approach to putting everything in position, it gets much easier because, like a deadlift, you've got maybe two or three things to think about tops. You take out bracing, you do your brace before you get down to the bar. That leaves two things, maybe three if you're really overthinking it. Bench press, God knows how many things. It's like, you know, it takes a long time to get it to the point where it's not overcomplicated because it is a complicated lift. So for me, the bench press, the way I'll coach to somebody, and it's really dependent on their flexibility and all that, how well they can adapt to it. But it's getting yourself under the bar, finding your palm position first, so it's right out in the bottom corner. Um, and this is I didn't make all this stuff up. I've picked this up from really good IPF coaches. Some of the guys locally here that used to work in our gym, picked up heaps of stuff from them over the years, and a lot of the just stuff on Instagram, whatever. But so getting that bottom outside corner of the palm, that's where the weight of the bar goes. Anything too far up the palm, you're dealing with an energy leakage because you're dealing with wrist flexion or wrist extension there. If it sits on there, it's directly above the ulnar. It's still loading. You're still going to get wrist bend, but that's going to be solid. So the big issue, and a lot of good coaches will still grip the bar. Like say, grip the bar really hard. If you grip the bar in a deadlift or a bench press, you are shifting mental energy towards the arms and the shoulders.
Mm.
If you bench with your arms and shoulders as the primary, like your primary neural input, it's going to be a shit bench because you're just muscling it around. Same with the deadlift. You pick a deadlift up by holding the bar hard and having arms and back flexed, like winding your lats in and that sort of stuff. You're taking away your ability to actually utilize the legs and the brace, which is what your main driver for your deadlift needs to be. So once you've got that palm set up, um, loaded onto the bar there, the idea is to build the biggest arch you can. You're basically smearing your neck into the bench. You're trying to drive your neck and make it as long as possible so that you can bring the rib cage up as high as possible, get your scap sliding down the back, uh, back and down, down. It's
Mm.
not that important. I see a lot of guys say, back and down, particularly sort of old school benches. Um, a lot of IPF coaches like don't bring your scaps together, just drive them down your back.
Mm.
Depress. They both kind of work. It's not a huge deal, but I find if you try and bring them together too much, you'll end up bunching the muscles underneath you, and they'll kind of become fixated. So I do subscribe to the idea of just driving them down and not together. Um, you're using essentially your lats or your spinal extensors, a lot of the muscles under the back, under the scaps there, to bring the rib cage up and spread it apart as much as possible. And all of that is being underpinned by the legs.
Right.
So getting to like focusing on the leg as the single most important part of the structure of your bench press is what separates people who are getting pretty good at bench from people who are getting really good at bench.
Mm.
So
Mm.
the leg drive. So you set yourself up in a big rainbow. You've pushed yourself up. You use the bar to actually leverage your chest up. So you're like a pull down motion. Unrack the bar by straightening the elbows. The bar is then resting. Once you've got the bar off the rack, you your neck to feet, your butt's not on the bench. You've got this really, you're using the legs to drive tension. You're sticking your neck to the bench and you're trying to use the scaps to pull the bar back down towards your, feet. Feet are driving that way, scaps are driving that way. That's going to pull you into a big arch. And then you'll like if you watch any of the IPF benches, they really arch their lower back to try and find the bench. Obviously,
Mm.
putting your butt on the bench in that scenario is a forced weak point. You have to do it for movement standards. So they're trying to minimize how much contact they've got with the butt on the bench. Obviously, you don't want it to sort of bounce around and maybe get whites or not. So decent contact without actually putting any weight into the bench. So you're fully loaded between your legs and your neck,
Mm.
bars above you, back squeezed down, legs are on hard, butt goes down gently to the bench. And then the key thing that I think people forget about, and this is what I watch and correct weekly, once that bar starts moving, the press is only going to be as good as the descent. So once people have got a really good solid setup, a lot of the time they'll lower the bar and they'll break under it. The legs will shift forward. So you'll see the knees bend a little bit forward that way. The body will sink under the bench slightly. This is for a soft touch, not a sink bench, mind
Mm.
you. If you're going to do like a controlled soft touch bench, as that bar comes down to the chest, you're using everything in your ability to make your rib cage rise to the bar. You want to meet
Mm.
it as high up as you can get. That means you're going to be utilizing the legs, not the whole legs, not the hips, because if you squeeze your glutes, you're going to pop your butt off the bench. So it's quads only. Back muscles are going to be going except the very upper back. So everything from about sternum up to neck, the upper thoracic. You want to try and relax your spine and the muscles around there so you can really jam it. Like
Right.
relax that so the upper spine bends really hard. Once that bar then touches, you've put everything into it to try and get the chest to get height. Um, the whole motion of the descent of the bench, tricep and pec strength, all that stuff is kind of very secondary. It takes care of itself. You can do any accessory you like. As long as your pecs and triceps are being developed in some way, the only thing that's going to make you better at bench press is doing that bench press technique.
Yeah.
Um, so once you've got that point, obviously it's just a matter of driving the bar off your chest.
Do you think about
Without
elbows at all? Like, because obviously I know with the Japanese style, they're very big on flearing. Am I right in saying that flearing the elbows, or is that
Yes,
just like a
so
byproduct?
from,
Or
from my perspective on the descent, because you're trying to tuck, you're trying to use the lats and the back muscles pretty actively to make the bar track in a nice smooth motion. You'll find that that obviously pulls the bar down the chest slightly, or up, up into the incline of the chest. Too much of that, and you'll end up tucking the elbow. A tucked elbow
Mm.
will force you into external rotation, and then you'll just be tricep pressing it. Too much flaring means you'll just guillotine yourself.
Yeah.
So it's just trying to find that nice touch point where the depression of the scaps gets you a nice clean touch where you can press off. It's almost going to be like a vertical chop if you've driven down hard enough. Then when you press off, let the scaps go, let that elbow flare a little bit. If you watch someone like John Hack is just this enigma. None of his competition lifts are good technique.
Yeah.
His squats are hideous.
It's
His
Scott's
bench press
a
is
hybrid bar, isn't it? It's like
yeah. His,
in
his
between.
bench
It's
press is
weird.
like rudimentary to some degree. Like he's got a narrow grip, whatever. He's just strong. His deadlift is just like fuck. I'll just pick it up. But you know,
Yeah.
he's far and away, like, with the exception of maybe two people in the world, probably the most unreal powerlifter who's ever lived. So
Mm.
you often think, like, if John Hackett had maybe been more coachable, or I don't know, would he be better? Would he not be better? I don't know. But from the much less gifted people that we all work with, as a rule, um, some of those small considerations make huge differences. I've got one woman who's, for her weight, she's an outrageous bench presser, an outrageous lifter in general, but her bench press is, but she gets forgetful
Right.
sometimes. She'll just do a big press and it'll be slow off the chest, and she'll be like, felt shit. And I was like, you literally forgot to use your legs. After all these years and thousands of bench presses, you forget to use your legs. Happens all the time. And that's getting into a habit where you, or a sequence of setup for bench press, is super important because it's the one where there are so many elements that need to be gotten exactly right to
Mm.
get that consistent outcome. Which is why you said bench press is always the most inconsistent lift for people, or for coaches. I think you find your
Yeah,
clients are like,
definitely.
had a bad bench session, had a good bench session, it felt weak today, felt strong today, technique wasn't quite on, or it was quite on, or whatever. Um, and there's just too much to think about.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
It's
if
for me, it's the most technical, I would say, out of all of the lifts and the movement
oh,
patterns.
by a mile.
Yeah, when you look at it, and I find that interesting about what you're saying there about making sure that everything's consistent every single time. The leg drive is what holds everything together. Because you're right, that's the first thing that goes with people. They get sloppy on their leg drive, and
Yeah,
that is literally the thing that's holding the entire structure, together, basically. Like
yeah.
that's the foundations for your bridge. And then if that goes, well, of course, everything up the chain's going to be super
Down.
unstable, So,
It's totally fair. Like it's fair for that to happen because the weight is above your chest or your face or whatever. You're controlling that weight with your arms. So all of your kind of subconscious neural input is going to be here until
mm,
you get good enough to learn not to switch that off. If you can do a really heavy bench press and not think this weighs whatever, this X weight, or this is going to feel heavy on racking or whatever, you have a process, you do the process. Obviously it's still effort, but you're focusing on executing cues. You're not focusing on the bar or the lift or the weight. And that's,
mm.
I think, the more elite a lifter gets, the more that just becomes a matter of course.
Well, that's something I
People who are in
think.
that low to middle grade, that's
Yeah,
that's where they're finding it hard. That's where things like the fear comes in, and you start
yeah,
manhandling deadlifts and bench press, particularly because why wouldn't you? I'm scared of
yeah,
this weight, and I've got it in my hand, so I'm gonna fucking grab it. You know.
yeah.
Whereas if they completely let the bar go and just let it rest in their palms and focus entirely on their legs and you know their back, it would move way better. So, but
Well,
it's you've got to do it a
that
thousand times to convince people that that works.
that's it, and that's a key point you just said there. Because when I'm, executing the lifts, I'm not thinking about the weight really at all. Obviously, you need to know the weight going into the workout. You need to know that you're progressing, right? But when you're actually in the workout itself, you're focusing on the process, right? And that's something that I
Mm.
often think about is that there's a gold standard to technique, absolutely, and we all should strive towards that gold standard. And it's about focusing on the thing you can control and not what
Mm.
you can't control, right? And I talk about this all the time with my lift because I can hit a squat, but how many times you've been here where you hit a squat and you get it, but the technique is awful and you haven't thought through your processes, or you haven't, like, I visualize on a heavy, on my PR sets anyway, my heavy sets, and my goal is to repeat what I visualized in my head but under the bar in real time. So I try and keep it a closed loop system, because a lot of people, I
Mm.
think, go open loop, right? And there needs to be open loop, in sports like basketball where things are very reactive, right? Or, MMA where there's a lot of uncontrollables. But with what we do, they're
Like
very
getting
quite
punched in the face. Yeah,
like,
definitely.
yeah, again, but
That would upset my mojo.
yeah. But when it comes to what we do, they're very, static lifts, right? So
Mm.
we have the opportunity to actually think our way through lifts. And that's something I know a lot of coaches will say, think less, right? And I used to prescribe to this mindset, but I actually do the opposite. I'm actually thinking through in my head as I'm coming down and coming up, and I'm very aware during the movement patterns. And the goal for me is to repeat what's in my head, but in real time under the bar. So I'm
Mm.
constantly in a closed loop system, and that's the goal for me.
I
The goal
I
isn't the
think
weight.
I think the thinking thing is, um, I think overthinking what's happening is the biggest killer for almost everybody.
Yes.
Because if you think hard about something, you'll forget to do something else. It doesn't leave room.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
you need to have those key things. You only and what you're saying when you visualize it is you're replicating the lift that you visualize. So you're thinking about the cues that matter. Whereas I think
Yes.
the more novice lifters are overthinking. So if they think about it too much, they think about it 10 things that don't matter. So it's coaching.
Yeah.
I think coaching is teaching people what matters and then teaching them how to
Mm,
execute those things and think only about those things. And it's obviously for more novice lifters, it's a big aspect of it is being on like what's going on, what's going to happen, because they just haven't done it enough times. You don't know what your limit is, you don't know what it's like to fail a squat, or you don't know whatever, and if they're new, and particularly if they're getting relatively frequent PRs, everything is new. Like every weight is like, I haven't done this weight, and you're like, yes, you have. You've done this exact squat or lift before. It's a different weight, but nothing changes. Don't
mm,
approach it
mm.
in any different way. Don't think about it anymore. In fact, think about it less. Just it's like focus on my voice. Just like mesmerize them so they just go, I must squat. Think, get your brace right. We need to get your rib cage and your pelvis in the right place. We need to get you inflated to the appropriate level, but not too much. We need to have you in the right position with your center of mass, the right part of your foot. That's it. If you think
Yes.
about
Yeah.
anything else, where's the bar sitting on my back? Which way do I lean? Like, is the bar going to be heavy? What should my knees be doing? Are my feet pointing in the right direction? Like stuff that over time, if you're always a really wide stance squatter and your feet are suddenly really narrow, obviously it's going to feel wonky. If your feet are slightly different to they normally are, but it's a big heavy lift, it's probably not going to make that much difference. So don't
Yeah.
don't think about it.
Yeah,
Focus
for
on the things
sure.
that you should always be focusing on. Get your brace right, get your balance right. Enter into the squat in the same pattern with whichever way you like to do it, whether you pre-hinge or fold or whatever. Um, and that's it. Any more than that, and it just goes out the window.
Yeah,
I
that's
think when you
some.
get to say it's different for say maybe you or me, we can be a bit more analytical about what our bodies are doing in space because you've done it so many times. Plus, you've watched hundreds of people go through
Mm,
this process. You know the process, and so you know which mistakes they're going to make before they make it because you know
mm.
that that's the mistakes that always have to be made in order to learn how to do it better. So it's a bit different, I think. Once you can be a bit more introspective in your movement. But yeah, stripping that back, I think for most sort of novice to intermediate lifters is probably far more
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, definitely. And you've hit the nail on the head there, is about knowing what to focus on and what not to focus on. Because that's true, when you start these movement patterns, you're trying to think of, well, you do tend to overthink a bunch of different variables that just don't matter really,
Yeah.
and you're right, when I'm coming down and coming up. I'm thinking about my brace and I'm thinking about keeping that really tight. I'm thinking about that shoulder tension. I'm thinking about my foot pressure and keeping tightness in my hips. And it's all like one feeling together. You kind of after thousands of repetitions, it's a feeling, it's not
Yeah,
necessarily a specific. It's just you know that feeling and you're focusing in on that feeling and maintaining that as one unit, and you know
yeah.
when you've nailed it and when you haven't nailed it. One thing, mate, I want to ask you about because I think this is going to be funny getting you back on every year and chatting to you about this. But pet peeves, mate, in the powerlifting space over the last year, is there something that has just boiled the water for you in the last
Um,
year, or any updates or any
Probably.
big pet peeves?
It's kind of hard to say because okay, number one is just this modern haircut that gym kids have. Like the broccoli. That what the other than that though, in terms of actual like um I find as I've gotten
Broccoli.
older and a lot more experienced, and also I actually get way less exposure, except via Instagram here and there. I get almost no exposure to commercial gym environments.
Right.
So I don't see what happens in the the fitness world. So it doesn't piss me off. I don't get angry at all the just raging stupidity. I mean, everybody likes to pick on like Joel Seedman and stuff like that,
Right.
and rightfully so because the guy's insane. Um, but there's like big arguments between I don't know, there's people who are a bit sports science. You got Mike Israetel versus somebody, or you've got
Mm.
um, God knows what. There's all sorts of crap going on. Sometimes it's good to be rise above it a bit, and you know which one of them's right, or you know what part of the argument they're missing because you've seen it. Other times it's quite interesting, like you find out stuff that you didn't really think about or you didn't know. Some of the stuff that people get really argumentative about, it just doesn't matter. You
For
know,
sure.
a lot of the kind of bodybuilding stuff, like who cares? You're not even really doing a sport. Like
Yeah, it's a beauty
your training
pageant.
doesn't matter what your training is. It's whatever. It's just doing reps. So, um, other than that, I don't think there's any like real big, uh, nothing that's really got like grinded my gears, ground my gears, I guess. Because I don't really engage.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, if there's something new that's interesting that I can learn, that's great. If there's a bunch of people arguing about something esoteric in the molecular level of sports science, I don't care. It's
Yeah.
not
I'm the
none of that
same.
stuff has any long-term impact on anything. Like it might make a difference to what rep range or what kind of how many sets are important, but the real world intrudes on all of those stupid arguments anyway. Um,
I think, mate, sorry to interrupt you there, but what you're touching
mm,
on is really important because when you're in the real world, I think it's two different worlds, right? So you've got the social
mm,
media world and you've got our world, where in our world, we're actually working with people, right? Like, day to day, we get feedback in, we
yeah,
adjust things, we understand in real time what works and what doesn't work. And then you have the other world where you've got the people debating with one another, having the toxic wars on social media back and forth about the right research study or wherever it might be. And none of
yeah,
that really matters. And the thing is, I can relate to a lot of what you're saying, a lot to what you're talking about there because I've had a similar shift, especially in the last year myself, where before maybe I would have watched those videos and a few years back and enjoyed them, but now I'm like, oh, I don't need to because I know what
mm,
works. Like
yeah,
I'm getting data in every single day. I don't care about this research paper because I've got a 10 years of experience to suggest what works and what doesn't work and why I train people this way. So I think that's
yeah,
probably a little bit of it, isn't it? You
big
kind
time.
of, yeah, for sure. I can relate a lot to that, mate. A lot.
I think one of the biggest examples of that was the late great Dr. Andrew Locke, who
Yes.
would just savage people constantly. He's like, "How much clinical experience do you have? How much experience do you have?" And you know, say what you like about him, he wasn't always necessarily the most standard kind of guy. But he did have a point in that aspect. You know, he did have an enormous amount of clinical experience, um, and that does often uh, trump your knowledge of research. You know,
Yes,
your knowledge
definitely.
of the academic side of it, or um, any of that sort of stuff. So you've got enough time with boots on the ground. You you come up with your own stuff, and you use that some of those arguments to really sort of inform why you already do what you do, or maybe sometimes to change it a little
Mm,
bit. Um, but for the most part, it's just like you probably have something better to do than
definitely.
sit there and waste time arguing about that crap. Um, yeah, I
Definitely.
think I think the only thing is probably things like I've sort of seen a trend. I reckon that the technique cues people are getting off Instagram are improving in quality over time.
Well, that's
I think there's a
interesting.
lot of really good young lifters who've had great coaches who was, like being an influencer or whatever is a big thing these days. And these 18-year-old kids are doing 800 plus totals, or more, drug tested, all this sort of stuff. And you're like, what the hell's going on? It's just there's just a massive improvement in the level of knowledge
Yeah.
at all the different strata of, I think it's probably worse as you go back in time. There's a lot of guys who've been around for a long time who haven't really moved along with the times, who are still teaching their gold standard techniques that might be a little bit behind the times.
Yes. Yeah.
I think that's actually a good thing. It's probably less, not a great pet peeve, but probably more of a positive thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
That's it. Yeah.
there's a huge amount of people out there that actually have really good fundamentals.
For
And
sure.
sometimes you see something that you disagree with a little bit, but it sort of fades out a little bit compared to the general high level of knowledge.
Mm.
So, but that's also,
I,
like I said, this is powerlifting accounts. This is people doing powerlifting coaching, not general fitness, not any of that sort of stuff. There's a couple of guys out there in their work more in bodybuilding who are just like, oh my god, I'm not even sure if you're literate.
Mate,
Whereas,
the bodybuilding
um,
world is just, I mean, I see some of the accounts and the standard. I honestly don't know how a lot of them have jobs. Like, I'm just
yeah,
like, there's
not
just
all of it. There's
not,
some really smart
not,
guys in
not,
there.
not,
There are
there's
some
some
really
real,
smart.
yeah, of course, there's some really smart dudes out there. But I'm
There's
like,
a lot of not.
there's a lot, yeah, absolutely, and like I just see some of the stuff that, how to do a lat pull down or whatever it might be, and it's like, well, with a squat, there's it's really really base a lat pull down compared to a squat is like a lat pull down is really basic compared to that. A squat, there's a lot of, there's a skill component to it. Yeah, you
Yeah,
got people like teaching like different like tweaks on how to do this on a machine or that, and I'm like,
it's like a
what the
20-minute
hell's going
tutorial of how
on?
to put a fork in your mouth. You're like entry of
So on a pull
angle,
down,
like
you just pull
height
it
of
down,
elbow.
bring your chest up, and and
Yeah,
and, and fully extend at the top, and that's pretty much you're done.
yeah, yeah.
But
Well, that was brief. Thanks, guys. Yeah,
yeah, that's
yeah,
it.
yeah. That was actually that was one. There was a brief period there where there was a few of the bigger names who were arguing about lat pull downs, and that was a. It's like, what is wrong?
Mate, the
What is
one
wrong
that
with your
I
life?
the one that I get, guess me, is all the different, like they got one hand on front in the pad and they're like angling in and they're doing all of this stuff,
Uh,
as they like, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm just do the damn row,
just
But yeah. It's
yeah.
hilarious. But mate, anyway, look, it's been awesome having you on, and I love catching up with you. That's one of the great things about this podcast because I literally just have chats with people that, I want to catch up with or whatever, and yeah, I've
Mm.
got some great
You've had
relationships.
some. I did notice you've had some big names on recently.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I
Been
appreciate it.
doing really
Yeah.
good. Who was
Yeah.
your favorite? Who was your biggest? Like the one you went, holy shit! I've got X on the podcast.
Man, to be honest, I can't say I have a favorite per se because I personally like I really enjoy like speaking to people like yourself, to be honest, like we're, people that I just genuinely get along with, like those are my favorite, like going into the studio with James every week, like having a
Hmm.
catch up with him, and Like those are my favorite episodes, but there have been a few where I've got someone on and I'm like, holy shit, like how did this come about? I
Mm.
think probably in the earlier days, when I was like just reaching out to people and trying to get people on and actually they'd say yes. People like I remember a surreal one was Matt Wenning. So I was
Yeah.
literally like, I didn't know if he was going to turn up, and I emailed him, and he's like, "Oh yeah, shit, I'm just mowing my lawn." He said, "I'll be on in 5 minutes." So he comes on, and literally the screen is just filled up with shoulders, and like he's just like, I'm like, "Oh my
Yeah.
God," because he was at the
Like now,
start.
obviously.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like now, mate. That's it. Exactly right. But yeah, he just filled up the entire screen, and I was just like, wow, I'm having a chat with Matt Wenning, that's pretty
Mm.
crazy. So I think I haven't got a favorite say, but I've when I started it and I had people actually coming on that were names, people that I would, listen to on videos and stuff like that, and they were actually coming on. It was a little bit surreal at the start, but then I think you just get over it. You realize if anything, it's like you having confidence in yourself and thinking, do you know what, I belong here. I shouldn't look at these people in a certain light.
Mm.
Obviously have respect and stuff like that for them. Of course, they paved the way for someone like me, but at the same time, don't get imposter syndrome. Like you've worked hard to
Yeah.
be here. So I think that's been the biggest learning curve for me is just having more confidence in myself to speak to these people.
Mm.
Um, have you thought about doing a podcast, mate? You would do great in a studio. I can imagine you doing really well. You were Matt at the in a studio doing a podcast.
I mean, I've only just started. One of my clients is a videographer, and I've just started making content of any kind that isn't just like reposting squats.
Yeah.
And I was pretty crappy at it. Like I've always enjoyed doing something here and there, but getting my kind of teeth into it a bit um, has been quite fun. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, if I got to the point where I had some stuff and set some stuff up for whatever reason, I could. Yeah, I'm sure I could probably see myself doing it down the track. At the moment,
Mate, I'd love that.
I just don't
I'd be
really have
tuning in.
time. But
Yes, I
yeah,
said with the kids.
yeah, I've got a special reel coming up with absolutely no reason for existence. I'd love for you to see it. It's very dairy
Yes.
based. So this is if you let me with a camera and somebody who's good at editing, this is what happens. So I'll probably try and make a bit more stuff. Some of it I like trying to sort of get across some educational things, um, but I do probably more enjoy just being kind of a dickhead. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I don't know. A podcast could be fun. We can enjoy that.
Yeah, I,
You
I
know.
would be tuning in for sure, mate. In if you had a studio and stuff like that, you could put it up on YouTube. And I just enjoy having a chat with people, That's the biggest thing for
Mm,
me. It's like I find some, especially strength podcasts, and there's a time and a place, but for that information, but a lot of them are completely just like information heavy to the point where
yeah.
it's just science the entire time. And I remember when I was coming into this and I was just like listening to some of these podcasts and I loved it because I'm a complete nerd, around this stuff. But I just thought, God, this isn't accessible for a lot of people. And
Yep.
so for us, it was very much a balance of keeping there a chat with people, and actually being curious about, for instance, you chatting about bench press then. Like I learned a lot, like I was like invested into that. And that's the biggest thing I
Yeah, I can
think
see you
with
leaning right in like that.
yeah, I do. I tend to do that, but and keeping the podcast about curiosity and
Mm,
rather, this is the structure, this is what we're going to talk about, and it's very much, I think, initially like that at the start because it's a skill, but then over time you relax a bit more and you can keep it more of a conversation. I think that's been my biggest goal with this is to keep it a little bit more user friendly for people
yeah.
and they can still learn and take stuff away. So you'd be great, mate. I'd love to listen. I'll see it now in few months' time. Beau's got a podcast in studio.
Ah, yeah. Well, I mean, I've never really been into podcasts myself, so I never really considered it. But now you've like struck the spark. I'm like,
You'd be great, mate.
maybe.
I'd love it.
Yeah.
I, I,
Did
I,
it
hey,
did it
I'd
did it
tune in.
devolve into a really like like bad dad comedy show, I think. But there's probably a
That's
market.
well, mate. Look, I'll leave you to it because you're coming up on an hour now. Where's the
Yeah.
best place for people to find you?
Probably still just Instagram. Yeah.
Yeah, and what's your handle again on Instagram?
I don't know. Beau underscore BPBC, I think.
Right.
Or
Okay.
through the gym. I just post on both, so it's just below parallel BC.
Yeah. And do you
Um,
guys have a website at all?
we do. It's more. It probably needs a good update,
Right.
but it's just.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
think it's just belowparallel.com.au. I'm not sure.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
but yeah, that's more for our sort of gym based admin and stuff. I think almost everything that we do, which is a bit more personality driven, is probably on Instagram.
Right, right. Well, mate, I'll attach you all anyway in the show notes and stuff like that. But honestly, Bo, it was really cool catching up with you, mate. I always
Yeah, you
love
too.
our chats, and we're gonna make this a yearly thing. Every year, we'll
Yeah,
me and you will pop on and we'll do a year in review or something like that.
I'll even get headphones next time, so
Yeah, that's
you're
it.
not listening to an iPhone speaker. But yeah,
Well, anyway, brother, have a great rest of your evening. I appreciate your time because I know it's evening for you over there. And yeah, I'll drop you a message once it's up.
beautiful. All right, thanks, Sam.
Right. Right. Thanks,
Good to see
Bo.
you, mate.
I'll good to see you. I'll catch you next year.
Too easy. All
See
right,
you, brother.
thanks, mate.
Bye. Bye.
See ya.